A milkman, who is dying in the hospital, is surrounded by his 2 sons, daughter, his wife, and a nurse. He says, "To you, Peter, I leave the Beverly houses. To you, my dear daughter, I leave the apartments in the Los Angeles Plaza. To you, Charlie, being my youngest son with a large future, I leave the city center offices. And you, my dear wife, the 3 residential buildings towers in downtown." The nurse, impressed, tells his wife, "Madam, your husband is very rich. He is bequeathing many properties. You all are so lucky." And the wife retorts, "Rich? Lucky? Are you kidding me? He is a milkman. Those are his routes where he delivers milk." A school teacher used to take a short nap every afternoon. When his pupils asked him why he did so, he said that he went to dreamland to meet ancient sages. One extremely hot day, some of the pupils fell asleep in the afternoon. When the school teacher chided them, they said, "We went to meet the sages in dreamland." "What did they say?" demanded the teacher. "We asked them if a school teacher came there every afternoon, but they said they had seen no such person." A poor boy but very brave man called Ali. He worked for Amar, a rich old merchant. One winter's night, Amar said, "Nobody can spend a night like this on top of the mountain without a blanket or food. But you need money, and if you can manage to do that, you will receive a great reward. If you don't, you will work for 30 days without pay." Ali answered, "Tomorrow I shall do this test." But when he left the shop, he saw that a really icy wind was blowing and became scared. So he decided to ask his best friend, Adi, if it was crazy of him to accept that bet. After reflecting a while, Adi answered, "I shall help you. Tomorrow, when you are at the top of the mountain, look ahead. I will be on the top of the mountain next to yours, where I will spend the whole night with a bonfire lit for you. You look at the fire and think about our friendship. That will keep you warm. You will manage. And later on, I shall ask you something in return." Ali won the test, got the money, and went to his friend's house. "You told me you wanted some payment." Adi answered, "Yes, but it isn't money. Promise that if at any time a cold wind passes through my life, you will light the fire of friendship for me." A little boy in Canada is learning about the world. He is curious about how things work, and one day he goes to his father and asks, "Dad, if big dogs can have little dogs, how come big trains don't have little trains?" Never unprepared, his father says, "Go ask your mother." The dutiful son finds his mother. "Mom, if big dogs can have little dogs, how come big trains don't have little trains?" "Well," she smiles, "why don't you go on down to the train station and ask the conductor?" Off goes the little boy to the station. He sees the conductor in uniform and says, "Excuse me, sir. Can you tell me why, if big dogs can have little dogs, how come big trains don't have little trains?" The conductor looks down at him. "Son," he says, "here at Via Rail, our trains always pull out on time." One morning, the ship was passing very close to a small island. As I was admiring the serenity of this far-off place, a ruckus occurred. On the island, a man came running out from the thickness of the brush. His hair was down to his waist, and his beard almost the same. His clothes were tattered straps, barely covering his beet red skin. He was frantically waving his arms around as he jumped up and down, and he seemed to be yelling something. The captain of the ship happened to be on a morning stroll around the deck, so I grabbed his attention and brought him to my spot on the rail. "Captain, there, on that island, there's a man over there. What do you think he's yelling?" I asked. "Oh, don't mind him," the captain replied. "He does this every 3 months when we pass by." At school one day, little Johnny's teacher asks the class to use the word contagious in a sentence. Cindy raises her hand. "Yes, Cindy." She answers, "I was at the dentist's office with my mom, and she said not to play with the toys in the waiting room because the other kids were contagious." "Very good, Cindy," the teacher said. "Anyone else want to try?" Samantha raises her hand. "Yes, Samantha?" She answers, "My dad tells me not to yawn, because then everybody else yawns. He says yawning is contagious." "Excellent work, Samantha. Very creative," the teacher praises. "Okay, one more volunteer." Little Johnny raises his hand. "Yes, Johnny?" "Well," he says, "I was helping my dad in the yard last week, and we saw the neighbor painting his house. He was using a small brush, so I asked my dad, 'Daddy, why is he using such a small brush?' And he says, 'I don't know, son, but it's gonna take that contagious.'" Two old ladies go visit their friend Mary. They sit down, and after a while, Mary says, "How foolish of me. I haven't even offered you coffee." So she gets up and gets the coffee. Sometime later, old Mary says, "How foolish of me. I haven't even offered you coffee." So again, she gets the coffee. Half an hour later, the scene repeats for the third time. Finally, the two ladies say goodbye. "Mary is acting really weird, don't you think?" says the first one. "All the time we spent there, she hasn't even offered us coffee." The second one looks at her in amazement. "What? You've been to see Mary, and you haven't even invited me?" One day, a 12-year-old girl was walking down the street when a car pulled up beside her and the driver lowered a window. "I'll give you a large bag of M&Ms if you get in the car," said the driver. "No way, get lost," replied the girl. "How about a bag of M&Ms and $10? The driver asked. "I said no way," replied the girl. "What about a bag of M&Ms and $50? Asked the driver. "No, I'm not getting in the car," answered the girl. "Okay, I'll give you a bag of M&Ms and $100, the driver offered. "No," replied the girl. "What will it take to get you in the car?" asked the driver. The girl replied, "Listen, Dad, you bought the Volvo. You live with it." Two elderly ladies had been friends for many decades. Over the years, they had shared all kinds of activities and adventures. Lately, their activities had been limited to meeting a few times a week to play cards. One day, they were playing cards when one looked at the other and said, "Now don't get mad at me. I know we've been friends for a long time, but I just can't think of your name. I've thought and thought, but I can't remember it. Please tell me what your name is. I'm so sorry. Her friend glared at her for at least 3 minutes. She just stared and glared at her. Finally, she said, "How soon do you need to know?" Defense attorney, will you please state your age? Little old lady, I am 86 years old. Defense attorney, will you tell us in your own words what happened the night of April 1st? Little old lady, there I was, sitting in my swing on my front porch on a warm spring evening, when a young man comes creeping up on the porch and sat down beside me. Defense attorney, did you know him? Little old lady, no, but he sure was friendly. Defense attorney, what happened after he sat down? Little old lady, he started to rub my thigh. Defense attorney, did you stop him? Little old lady, no, I didn't stop him. Defense attorney, why not? Little old lady, it felt good. Nobody had done that to me since my Albert died some 30 years ago. Defense attorney, what happened next? Little old lady, he began to rub my Defense attorney, did you stop him then? Little old lady, no, I did not stop him. Defense attorney, why not? Little old lady, it made me feel alive. I haven't felt that good in years. Defense attorney, what happened next? Little old lady, well, by then I was feeling a little hot and bothered, so I asked him to come closer. Defense attorney, and did he? Little old lady, well, he came closer and then yelled, "April Fools!" And that's when I shot the A mathematician, a physicist, and an engineer were each given the same red rubber ball and told to find the volume. The mathematician carefully measured the diameter and evaluated a triple integral. The physicist filled a beaker with water, put the ball in the water, and measured the total displacement. The engineer looked up the model and serial numbers in his red rubber ball table. 3 men, a physicist, an engineer, and a computer scientist are traveling in a car. Suddenly, the car starts to smoke and stops. The 3 astonished men try to solve the problem. A physicist says, "This is obviously a classic problem of torque. It has overloaded the elasticity limit of the main axis." Engineer says, "Let's be serious. The matter is that it has been burned the spark of the connecting rod to the dynamo of the radiator. I can easily repair it by hammering." Computer scientist says, "What if we get off the car, wait a minute, and then get in and try again?" There were these 2 elderly people living in a Florida mobile home park. He was a widower and she a widow. They had known one another for a number of years. Now, one evening there was a community supper in the big activity center. These 2 were at the same table, across from one another. As the meal went on, he made a few admiring glances at her, and finally gathered up his courage to ask her, "Will you marry me?" After a dramatic pause and precisely 6 seconds of careful consideration, she answered, "Yes, yes I will." The meal ended, and with a few more pleasant exchanges, and they went to their respective places. Next morning, he was troubled. Did she say yes or did she say no? He couldn't remember. try as he would, he just could not recall. Not even a faint memory. With trepidation, he went to the telephone and called her. First, he explained to her that he didn't remember as well as he used to. Then he reviewed the lovely evening past. As he gained a little more courage, he then inquired of her, "When I asked if you would marry me, did you say yes or did you say no?" He was delighted to hear her say, "Why, I said, 'Yes, yes, I will,' and I meant it with all my heart." Then she continued, "And I am so glad that you called because I couldn't remember who had asked me." A firefighter came home from work one day and told his wife, "You know, we have a wonderful system at the fire station. Bell 1 rings and we all put on our jackets. Bell 2 rings and we all slide down the pole. Bell 3 rings and we're on the fire truck ready to go. From now on, when I say bell 1, I want you to When say bell 2, I want you to jump in bed. And when I say bell 3, we are going to make love all night." His wife thought it was a bit strange, but also kinda kinky, so she agreed. The next night, he came home from work and yelled, "Bell 1!" The wife promptly took all her clothes off. When he yelled bell 2, the wife jumped into bed. When he yelled bell 3, they began making love. After a few minutes, the wife yelled bell 4. "What the bell 4?" asked the husband. A blind man walks into a restaurant and sits down. The waiter, who is also the owner, walks up to the blind man and hands him a menu. "I'm sorry, sir, but I am blind and can't read the menu. Just bring me a dirty fork from a previous customer. I'll smell it and order from there." A little confused, the owner walks over to the dirty dish pile and picks up a greasy fork. He returns to the blind man's table and hands it to him. The blind man puts the fork to his nose and takes in a deep breath. "Ah, yes, that's what I love. Meatloaf and mashed potatoes." Unbelievable, the owner thinks as he walks towards the kitchen. The cook happens to be the owner's wife. He tells her what had just happened. The blind man eats his meal and leaves. Several days later, the blind man returns and the owner mistakenly brings him a menu again. "Sir, remember me? I'm the blind man. I'm sorry. I didn't recognize you. I'll go get you a dirty fork." The owner retrieves a dirty fork and brings it to the blind man. After another deep breath, the blind man says, "That smells great. I'll take the macaroni and cheese with broccoli." Walking away in disbelief, the owner thinks the blind man is screwing around with him and tells his wife that the next time the blind man comes in, he's going to test him. The blind man eats and leaves. He returns the following week, but this time the owner sees him coming and runs to the kitchen. He tells his wife, "Mary, rub this fork on your before I take it to the blind man." Mary complies and hands her husband the fork. As the blind man walks in and sits down, the owner is ready and waiting. "Good afternoon, sir. This time I remembered you and I already have the fork ready for you." The blind man puts the fork to his nose, takes a deep whiff and says, "Hey, I didn't know that Mary worked here." 3 old men are discussing their failing memories. The first old man says, "Today I was at the top of the stairs and I couldn't remember if I had just gone up or was about to go down." The second old man says, I was sitting at the edge of my bed, and I couldn't remember if I was about to sleep or just woke up. The third man scoffs and says, "My memory is as good as ever, knock on wood." With this, he hits the table twice with his knuckle, looks up in surprise, and yells, "Who's there?" Two senior ladies were out for a Sunday drive in a huge car. Neither of them could really see too much over the dashboard. When they came to an intersection, the light was red, yet they kept on cruising through. The passenger thought to herself, "I feel like I'm losing it, but I swear we just drove through a red light." A few minutes later, they drove through another red light. The passenger was almost certain that the light had been red, but was still slightly concerned that she might be going mad. So she decided to give the driver one last chance. As they were approaching the next intersection, the passenger paid a great deal of attention. This time, the lights were certainly red, yet just as before, they just sped past. "Susan!" the passenger yelled. "Do you know we just ran 3 red lights in a row? We could have been killed." "Oh, am I driving?" came the reply. A priest is told by the bishop he is being moved to a new parish. The priest tells the congregation the news, and after the service, a woman comes up to him crying, "This is terrible news, Father, just terrible. You can't leave us. Refuse the move, tell the bishop to find someone else for the other church." The priest puts his arm on the woman's shoulder and says, "I realize this is difficult news for you, Mrs. Johnson, but who knows? Maybe the next priest for this parish will be even better than me." "Oh, sure," Mrs. Johnson says in hysterics. "That's what they told us the last time." A drunk guy is sitting at a bar by himself one night, and he throws up all over the front of his shirt. "Oh, great! My wife is going to kill me," he mumbles to himself. The guy sitting next to him sees what has happened and leans over towards him. "Hey, buddy, just put a $20 bill in your shirt pocket, and when you get home, tell your wife the guy sitting next to you threw up on you and he gave you $20 to get your shirt cleaned." Completely inebriated, the drunk thanks his new friend and puts a 20 in his shirt pocket, then heads for home. As soon as he walks through the front door, his wife becomes irate and starts yelling at him. "Where have you been? You're completely drunk and you're a mess. Look at yourself. You puked all over the front of your shirt." Completely wasted and slurring his words, he explains to the wife, No, the guy sitting next to me threw up on my shirt, and he gave me $20 to get it cleaned. Look, it's right here in my shirt pocket." The wife reaches into his pocket and pulls out the money. "There's $40 in here." "Oh yeah, he's at in my pants too." A man meets a beautiful girl. He really desires her, so he invites her to a movie, and she tells him, "Listen, if you're looking to sleep with me, then there is no need to get me dinners, movie evenings, and all that. Just buy me a good Swiss Army knife." The guy thinks. It's true, he's not interested in something long-term, so he buys her a good, genuine Victorinox. They come to her home. She opens a big chest standing in a closet and puts his knife there. The guy sees that the chest is half filled with such knives already. Then she takes him to her bedroom for a wonderful night together. The next morning, they're sitting at her kitchen, drinking tea, and he asks her, "Can I ask you a question? What would you need so many knives for?" You see, she explains, I'm young now. I'm beautiful. I have no trouble finding guys. In fact, they're the ones chasing me. But I know it doesn't last forever. One day, I'll be older, grey-haired. I'll be the one looking everywhere for a piece of love. And then, do you have any idea what a young man would be willing to do for a good Swiss Army knife? It was a man's 80th birthday, and his friends wanted to get him a special gift. Since he was a widower of many years, and after some discussion, they decide to have a hooker come to his house that night and give him the time of his life. Later that evening, as the old man was getting ready for bed, he hears the doorbell ring. He opens the door and sees a hooker standing there in a s***y outfit. She says to the senior, "Hi there, I'm here to give you some lovin'." The old man thinks for a moment, then says, "I'll take the soup." The psychiatrist was not expecting the distraught stranger who staggered into his office and slumped into a chair. "You've got to help me. I'm losing my memory, doctor," he sobbed. "I once had a successful business, a wife, home and family. I was a respected member of the community. But all that's gone now. Since my memory began failing, I've lost the business. I couldn't remember my clients' names. My wife and children have left me too. And why shouldn't they? Some nights, I wouldn't get home until 4 or 5 in the morning. I'd forget where I lived. And it's getting worse. Doctor, it's getting worse. This is not an unusual form of neurosis," the psychiatrist said, soothingly. "Now tell me, just how long ago did you first become aware of this condition?" "Condition?" The man sat up in his chair. "What condition?" Father was a hard-working man who delivered bread as a living to support his wife and 3 children. He spent all his evenings after work attending classes, hoping to improve himself, so that he could one day find a better-paying job. Except for Sundays, Father hardly ate a meal together with his family. He worked and studied very hard because he wanted to provide his family with the best money could buy. Whenever the family complained that he was not spending enough time with them, he reasoned that he was doing all this for them. But he often yearned to spend more time with his family. The day came when the examination results were announced. To his joy, Father passed, and with distinctions too. Soon after, he was offered a good job as a senior supervisor, which paid handsomely. Like a dream come true, Father could now afford to provide his family with life's little luxuries like nice clothing, fine food, and vacation abroad. However, the family still did not get to see Father for most of the week. He continued to work very hard, hoping to be promoted to the position of manager. In fact, to make himself a worthy candidate for the promotion, he enrolled for another course in the Open University. Again, whenever the family complained that he was not spending enough time with them, he reasoned that he was doing all this for them. But he often yearned to spend more time with his family. Father's hard work paid off and he was promoted. Jubilantly, he decided to hire a maid to relieve his wife from her domestic tasks. He also felt that their 3-room flat was no longer big enough. It would be nice for his family to be able to enjoy the facilities and comfort of a condominium. Having experienced the rewards of his hard work many times before, Father resolved to further his studies and work at being promoted again. The family still did not get to see much of him. In fact, sometimes Father had to work on Sundays entertaining clients. Again, whenever the family complained that he was not spending enough time with them, he reasoned that he was doing all this for them. But he often yearned to spend more time with his family. As expected, Father's hard work paid off again, and he bought a beautiful condominium overlooking the coast of Singapore. On the first Sunday evening at their new home, Father declared to his family that he decided not to take any more courses or pursue any more promotions. From then on, he was going to devote more time to his family. Father did not wake up the next day. Give time spending together with your family. It cannot be paid.